What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to yet another Mordhau video. My name's Knights, and I'm going to be sharing to you guys today what I believe the devs could change about their current perks and how they could add new ones that would add another dimension in the game. So I'm very grateful the perk system is here and it does exist. At the same time, the perks are kind of stale at this point. There's nothing too exciting about them, and I don't think it should be that way. Now, there are about 4 different things the devs can do to keep the game fresh and keep it exciting for the community. And that is map design, cosmetics, new weapons, and new perks. Now, they've hinted at most of these things, but I haven't seen any hints on new perks. And if I were to rank them in importance that they deliver them by, I would say map design is the most important. New perks would be the second most important. New weapons would be the third, and new cosmetics would be the fourth, given that they add actual mechanics or functions into the game, whereas cosmetics are cool and all, and I do think they should add them, but I think it should be on the back burner for now. So before we add any new perks, I would like to discuss a few current perks that are rather stale or boring or just bad or need at least some tuning. I do think these things are fairly common sense changes that should be made to the game to just make it play better. So first off, Brawler is a perk that is next to useless, and on top of it, it costs 2 points. So it adds only a boost to fist damage, and fist damage is useless given that you're supposed to be holding a sword or a weapon of some kind. So if they added a boost to kick damage as well, that would make sense because that is a brawling form, and it would enable you to use your kick more effectively, especially against shield players. So it'd be a nice shield counter at the cost of 2 points. Next is Flesh Wound, and this is a fairly selfish perk that does get you team killed quite frequently. Once you've entered the Flesh Wound phase, if you get sneezed on by a teammate, you pretty much drop dead. So I do believe once you've entered that last Flesh Wound stage when you're inevitably going to die, I do believe that TKing should be turned off once you've entered that phase. Next is Cat. Now, it currently reduces fall damage. This is functional for Crossroads, but not a whole lot more than that. Now, if they reduced the fall damage and increased the mantle speed, so the climb speed over ledges and walls and cliffs and things like that, that would be interesting, as well as boosting the ladder climb speed by, say, 25% or so. Now, there are quite a few existing ladders in the maps, for example, Crossroads or Grad. On top of that, if they did add a siege mode with large castles and large ladders, this could be actually quite beneficial. Next is Rat. Rat's a pretty just garbage perk, and if they reduce it down to 1 point, that would make more sense. And I would recommend to them consider reworking it in general. It's a pretty unpopular perk, and no one really uses it. Finally, we have Acrobat, which reduces the stamina jump cost by 50%. But I think they should add a jump height boost to it just to add a little bit more dimension to it, because it's, again, kind of not that essential and next to useless at the moment. So here's a list of new perks that I would consider adding into the game, or at least just throw by the devs and see what they think. Now, they may only latch on to one of these perks as something that would actually make sense in their game, and I do trust that they know best when it comes to this stuff. So these are just a few ideas. Marathon would add a 5% boost to max sprint speed. Lunge would be kind of like a dodge, but in more of an aggressive format. Perhaps limit the amount of times you can use it without a cooldown, so you can't use it quite as frequently as dodge, or perhaps just make it cost more. Thief, which is kind of like scavenger, but it's a bit different. You actually have to kill your enemy, and then that weapon automatically equips into your secondary slot or tertiary slot, and if it's full, then it will not do that, but you will basically keep filling up your inventory without actually having to pick up weapons. Next is Bash, which is a shield specific mechanic, but I do believe the shield mechanics are rather boring right now, and if they added this, it could add a bonus range to melees and use your shield, perhaps even bonus damage with the shield melees, and it could be used in a unique way of comboing that with various other types of strikes. Next is Athlete, which would increase a 5% boost to initial sprint momentum windup speed. So if you're wearing heavy armor, you can actually have the wind-up sprint speed of somebody that's wearing medium or light armor, depending on how much of a percentage they determine the athlete perk could do. Next is Assassin, 10% bonus damage from behind. So if you're able to sneak up behind somebody or clip them from behind, this would be an interesting mechanic. Finally, we have the Ricochet, which is essentially a passive defensive perk against archers and javelin players. Now, I believe that there are a lot of archers, and being a player that is constantly just getting nailed by arrows and javelins abundantly, that it would be nice to have a way to invest your perks into defending against this nonsense. So here's an example of Shield Bash, a way of pushing off of your opponent or knocking them perhaps all the way to the ground, depending on if they're in the middle of an attack of some kind. So there's kind of a lot of different ways that they can make this perk. On top of this, a ground stab, and I'll talk about this later, but I do believe they need to remove the bonus damage to targets that are already knocked over and add an actual stabbing the ground mechanic. Now, this is a Destiny clip just showing you guys other ways. Now, it's obviously exaggerated, but other ways you can bash people with shields. So, as you can see, I instantly one-shot anyone on the ground. So, here's an idea. This is from an old Lord of the Rings game, but a flourish to stab mechanic could do instant death to anyone that is below you, and again, removing bonus damage to targets on the ground. I find this unnecessary and honestly absolutely ridiculous that they've added this into the game. On top of it, your hitbox is like massive and super easy to get hit, so if they removed that, that would be great, and replaced it with a ground stabbing mechanic. Next is just a ball and chain idea, and actually I believe they've already hinted at this. Along with a cape would be unique, along with other cosmetics. I do believe the level 2 helmets, the level 2 chest pieces, and the level 1 legs are very, very limited at the moment and getting pretty dry. Now, here's just an idea, and I know they want to keep it historically accurate, but a two-sided saber of a sword, two-sided sword, or quarterstaff of some kind would be pretty badass, I'm not gonna lie, and it could add another dimension to combat. If you are able to block a strike overhead while winding up for your own overhead strike, this could be nice. Now, I'm not saying make your sword be able to do damage to targets, but at least be able to block targets from behind. I know Chivalry had this as sort of a mechanic that you could do. You could hit people by leaning backwards and hitting them without even really seeing them. They're completely behind you. So I'm not even saying they should add that, although I'm not entirely sure how the OG Shiv community feels about that perk, or that ability. They might actually believe that that's something that would be quite essential to increasing the skill gap, but I may be wrong about that. So at least it would be unique to be able to block shots by chambering or starting your own attack from overhead. This would just help with all around 1vx scenarios. And again, I'm not saying it should be able to damage targets, but at least block targets that are coming in from behind that you know are going to happen, but you have no choice but to focus on people in front of you. So it'd be unique to be able to begin an overhead strike and block the guy from behind you while striking the guy in front of you. That would just be a cool mechanic. Now, there's so much more I'd like to talk about with you guys, but I'm going to leave it at that. Now, again, don't be too critical of the perks. There's some flaws in there, and they're not perfectly worked out yet. But I want to hear you guys' thoughts on what perks could be added, how they can change the current perks, what you guys think. So yeah, guys, I'm really interested to hearing your opinions and thoughts, and I'm very stoked to be a part of this Mordhau community, and I look forward to the future. So again, I appreciate you guys dropping by the video, and I hope you enjoyed this one. Peace.